Welcome, everyone, to the Medfield College Film Society. I'm Jeff Crawford, and I'm joined by my society members, Mr. Robert McSwain. How are you doing tonight, Robert?
I'm doing just fine. I got my coveralls on. I got a nice big cup of Irish coffee, set of spanners, and an acetylene torch handy just in case the podcast starts to come apart down the stretch. So I'm ready to go.
Gotta watch out for that Irish coffee. It hits you hard quick. We'll go to Mr. Michael Crawford, my brother. How's it going tonight?
Very good. Very excited to hit the road, put the rubber to the road with the Herbie saga. This is the start of a long journey.
We are setting off. It's a very exciting night. And we will start with our patient, Mr. Andy Brown. How's it going, Andy? You excited for this?
Yeah, I see what you mean by saga and why you guys are so excited about this. So it's going to be an interesting one to talk about.
And I have a feeling it's going to go pretty long, so we'll just throw it right to Michael. What are we watching this week?
This week, we have the 1969 Disney classic, The Love Bug, produced by Bill Walsh, directed by Robert Stevenson, written by Bill Walsh and Don DeGrady. That whole crew, the Mary Poppins crew, a.k.a.
It's a dream team.
Dream team, based on a novel by Gordon Buford, starring Dean Jones, Michele Lee, David Tomlinson, Buddy Hackett, and Joe Flynn. Jeff, this movie has music by George Bruns.
Yes, and we've got the Walter Sheets on the orchestration. This was a team that worked through a lot of the 60s, and some great music to come. Absolutely.
Some really iconic Brunsing there.
Michael, we have to have a moment for Dean Jones here. I mean, he's your guy. He's our guy.
He is our guy. I'm always excited to talk about, Disney legend Dean Jones, after all. And rarely cooler than in this movie, in attitude correct. And wardrobe, in haircut and in driving style, in gum chewing and everything else.
It's funny because Dean Jones was like he was the icon actor for me growing up as a kid. Like if I saw him,
You're not wrong.
Okay, this is a Disney movie. There's no question about it.
Oh yeah. I think I said, it was probably on our other podcast that I said that when I was a kid, the two twin pillars of my youth were Harrison Ford and Dean Jones.
Yeah.
And they're both.
What do you mean of your youth?
Well, I'm underplaying it a little bit. Obviously, it's stayed around, but man, yeah, always excited to see Dean pop up.
I think this was my first Dean Jones flick.
Oh man.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So
Okay.
$1 Million Duck is on its way someday. So
it won't be your last. Well,
it won't be your
It's
last,
lurking around
sure.
out there.
We know.
what about the ugly Dosh?
Oh yeah.
What was that? Was
We've got to do that one.
The ugly Dawson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Must do.
That was a core element of Jeff and mine's canon.
Yes.
Yeah, this was a movie. It was originally going to be called Boy, Car, Girl, which I believe is the name of the book upon which it was based. It's really one of the last movies, although it came out, it premiered about 2 years after Walt died. It was one of the last movies that he had sort of creative input on and kind of got off the ground, even though it took a few years to come out. It was the biggest U.S. box office hit of 1969. And the number 2 Disney film to that date behind Mary Poppins. So it was a big hit. It had 3 direct sequels, a short-lived TV series with Dean Jones, a TV remake in the 90s with Bruce Campbell, in which Dean Jones also appeared, and a film remake with Lohan the decade after that. So this spawned a franchise.
That's right. This is part of the Bill Walsh dynasty. He was the most prolific or the most lucrative director before George Lucas, right?
Robert Stevenson, the director.
Robert Stevenson,
yes,
that's
absolutely.
right.
Bill Walsh was the producer, was also a prolific and very successful producer. But yeah, Robert Stevenson, before George Lucas came along, he was the guy because he just made all these Disney movies that just made a ton of money. So very successful.
And this is, the production team, the cast. We have a nexus point of a lot of Disney films, and we'll see that through the Herbie franchise. So
I encourage people to look up photos. We'll tweet some, I'm sure, of Herbie Day at Disneyland, which they had to promote this movie with a ton of different Volkswagen Beetles in all like hippie regalia parading down Main Street. So it's pretty good stuff.
excellent. So as we discussed in our teaser, Andy, you have seen none of the Herbie movies, correct?
You're correct. I have never seen any of these movies, so I am. I don't know. I mean, I've seen this one, obviously, but I guess that kind of sets the ground for what to expect for the future.
Now that you've seen this one, can you give us a non-spoiler reaction to it?
This movie was great.
Boom, we got him.
No,
Yeah.
for a while.
Oh,
And then it took a turn. There's some parts I loved the era. When you were talking about how cool Dean Jones was. There was so many cool things. I mean, just this time period in San Francisco, there was just so many cool things. But and the racing and all that kind of stuff. But as far as the movie itself and the storytelling, I've got some qualms.
okay. Well, shall we get into it, boys?
Let's do it.
Let's go. Swing that checkered flag.
Let's get going into Herbie the Love Bug. We'll start off with Act 1, and Robert, you have the helm.
We are met with our old friend, distributed by Buena Vista Distribution Company Incorporated, with some spirited music, and one of the greatest opening credit sequences in cinematic history begins as old cars from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s run around a figure-8 track, just missing one another. I must say that really makes me kind of want to go back to one of those races and see the insanity for myself, but I've never witnessed a figure-8 race. I've seen a demolition derby before, but
Well, my question from this is what kind of a race is this? Because
it's a figure-8 race. So
I
they're
mean,
in a
I
figure-8.
thought of a demolition derby like as we would used to see at the Cleveland County Fair. You would see
Shout
the
out
demolition
Cleveland
derby.
County Fair, yes.
Yeah.
It's barely a race. It's mostly a demolition derby.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Like, I've seen them do them with school buses a lot. Like, they'll put
wow.
school buses in a figure-8 like that.
See Cars 3, where they have a school bus in a figure-8 race.
That's right. Yeah.
When I was in high school, my father worked at a truck driving school in Eastern Tennessee, and we'd get free tickets to Tazewell Speedway in Tazewell, Tennessee, and it's known as the world's fastest third of a mile dirt track. And
That's really specific.
yeah, it is really specific. But man, oh man, this immediately brought me back to as a kid going to those races and the people you'd see.
Yeah, yeah.
We start seeing some wrecking here, and there's one scene where like the cars are they're flailing all over the track, and one goes up on a hill and like almost takes out a bystander. Like you see some guy who's sort of like, I mean, I guess he's maybe a judge or an official, but he's like running for his life in one scene. I don't know if you guys caught that or not.
No, I was too
did
caught
not
up in
see
the
that.
chaos.
There were a lot of guys though, like standing right close to the track.
Yeah, they were like right down there. This guy was up on a hill, like watching, like right there near the figure-8, and one car goes up, and he just makes a beeline out of frame. And I hope he's all right. And I pretend to be a gearhead, but my father, who's a legit gearhead, or a petrol head for our British listeners, would be able to identify most of these cars just by looking at them. But I'm watching it, and just it kind of makes me cringe a little bit as the Bel Airs and all these like classics go by, and just getting just wrecked.
Yeah.
So after countless wrecks and automotive mayhem, car number 4B, or was it 48 maybe? It was kind of hard to tell. It rolls over and on top of its roof, and out crawls our hero Dean Jones, with a great audio cue, I might add. So we cut to the first of many amazing backdrops that are stunningly realistic and impressive as Dean is riding in a car, His character's name is Jim, we find out. And they're riding through the streets of San Francisco. And in the background, we see the bay. And the man in the car, who I presume is his sponsor, is telling Jim that he needs to hang it up. He's too old to be a driver. And all these young guys are much better than him, and he just needs to quit.
His sunglasses are right on time.
Oh, yeah.
Jim is, yes, wearing some really sharp wraparound sunglasses that are look and mimic a lot of the sunglasses that I've seen our producer here, Jeff, wear in his college days. I
wish.
So.
I wish I had some that dope.
And we discover that Jim is down and out, and more importantly, out of cars. A key component to being a race car driver. Jim is dropped off at an old beat-up engine number 3 building in San Francisco, and we get another amazing backdrop. Michael, do you have anything to add to the backdrops? Like who painted these? Like the set design here? Because it's
there were several people credited. The one that sticks in my mind who probably did the paintings themselves is Peter Ellenshaw.
The goat.
The goat of the Ellenshaw family of matte artists who were like mad geniuses and who worked on everything. It's his work throughout. They get a lot of mileage out of that. But I also find it's interesting. They also do a lot of location shooting in San Francisco, which is unusual.
They do backlots in a couple of spots, so it's really all over the place. But man, it makes me wish that every movie was based in San Francisco. It's just such a cool place. The backdrops and the scenery is such a part of this movie.
It's a crazy city. Yeah, I agree. I'll note here that he's dropped off in a late 60s first generation Mustang in royal blue, which I really dig. And it's going to be one of the many amazing vehicles throughout this movie. So as Jim gets out, we see that his home is going to be torn down and to make way for some new Marina View apartments.
That's progress.
So Jim pulls a gnarled up bumper out of the Mustang and hands it to his buddy in the side yard, who happens to be Buddy Hackett, who's an amateur scrap metal artist. Buddy, a.k.a. Tennessee, is trying to talk Jim out of racing as well.
I've met this guy in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, for sure.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. A lot of in Carborough. This firehouse set is pretty iconic as well. It's a nice little slice of time.
And I would totally live there if I could. That's awesome. Like how they have it set up. So Jim is looking to find one more race. He goes out to get Tennessee's Edsel, the quote-unquote beast, only to find out that Tennessee has chopped the beast for one of his art projects.
Got to have an Edsel joke in there.
And he says the Edsel's going to be happier up on his art than where it was left. So without a job and a car, Jim goes out looking for answers in the streets of San Francisco wearing an outfit, again, straight out of Jeff's closet circa 1999.
Man, I wish. I mean, this is what I always wanted to wear. I noted a lot of his outfits, and so I will say he's wearing an orange turtleneck, a suede blazer, and a prominent belt buckle. I mean, very nice.
Look,
you got pretty close, and I'll add a story here because Jeff is the guy that wore a trench coat and an outfit similar to this to Mannequins, the nightclub at Pleasure Island, once with me, circa 2002. That was his outfit of choice that night. It was just a trench coat and this.
Shout out Mannequins.
And you stood in the middle of Mannequins, just like it was one of the more surreal moments of my Disney World life. Was that?
Everything is surreal at Mannequins.
Yeah. Rotating dance floor. Yeah, it's very kind of Bullet era Steve McQueen, his look in this.
Yes.
So why is he friends with Tennessee? That was my question, because Tennessee seems like is this artist who said he went to Tibet. So I wonder what's the connection there.
Yeah, that is what I wonder too, like how they met up. Because I mean, Tennessee is like full bore hippie. He tries to give him like seaweed to aerate his liver. He's been to Tibet and like spoken to the llamas and all this stuff. I would love to know their origin story.
Right, it's an odd couple pairing.
Well, it's San Francisco, so
Well, let's write up a prequel to it. Let's get it going.
There's a funny Disney obsession with the counterculture, like in this era of Disney, that pops up in a lot of movies because they were clearly like that. I mean, they were the most like super straight edge like white guys ever at Disney, and it's clear these crazy counterculture hippies, and so that really comes through big in this movie.
Well, it's funny you mentioned like a prequel. Like I put that later in my notes somewhere that I thought they needed to do a prequel backstory on Tennessee, just on him being in Tibet.
Yeah, we got Disney Plus now. We can do the Tennessee
Disney Plus limited series.
He mentions it throughout the movie, like multiple times.
Disney Tennessee,
and it becomes a major plot point later on in the movie. His time in Tibet does. So, but Jim's attention is suddenly stolen when he sees a nice pair of legs hanging a sign that says, "May we direct your attention to these." Yeah. Nice he tries to peer around the sign only to be startled by the lady who invites him in. Inside, we see a luxury indoor car dealer that specializes in British cars.
So nice.
However, Jim is taken by a car on a rotating turntable, and we're introduced to the salesman who is played by the legendary David Tomlinson, who calls the car a Thorndike Special.
I mean, you may be talking about him, but what drew me was Michele Lee. I was like, whoa, hello.
Your attention was drawn.
Yeah.
As advertised.
Absolutely. That sign worked on me.
I'm going to have to take the detour here and put my history hat on. And I don't, Michael, maybe you've already researched this, but I found out some interesting history about the Thorndike Special I like to add.
Go right ahead.
So now as a kid, I thought this was a Jaguar E-Type, which is a car that I like really love. And so I started digging around on it because I was like, it doesn't look quite like an E-Type. So I thought maybe it was a modified E-Type. And I found out that it was a short-lived car company called the Apollo Car Company that was based in Oakland. And they only produced 88 cars from 1962 to 1965. Jeez. And they never identified this car as an Apollo, so I can only assume that it was just supposed to be a Thorndike Special and a fictional car. But it actually was an Apollo car, and they made 2 of them for the movie. So in 2004, a gentleman was bidding on a frame for an Apollo, got it, and it was a 65 Apollo 5000 GT, was the model that they built. He bought it on eBay, and according to the article I found on barnfinds.com, he got it home and started stripping the paint off of it and noticed it was yellow. So being that they only had 88 cars, he started thinking, okay, well, how many yellow cars do they make? And then he started noticing that there was a lot of dents and dings and bang, like the car had been in a wreck. So he started going, that's weird. And he said, they used one of these in the movie Herbie, or in the Love Bug. And he watched the movie and noticed that a lot of the dents and bangs were, lined up with what happened to the car in the movie. And he thought, this is crazy. This can't be. There's just no way. And then it was confirmed after he found it and talked to some people in the production and found out that the car was, in fact, one of the 2 they used in the movie. And he decided to restore it fully back to the way it was in the movie. So it's still around.
And it's like broken state?
No, he's got it back to fully restored now. But as it was there in the showroom, and it looks really cool.
Very nice.
Wow.
Man, this showroom is what got me, I have to say. That I just wanted this to be a place where you could go in real life, and like maybe it's a bar at a Disney theme park or something. But
that'd be great. Well, speaking of bar, he's got a nice fold-out bar.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
that was really nice.
So
really,
cool.
really nice. I love the little turntable the car's up on, and Jim's just like so taken with the car, he just gets up on the turntable. But yeah, everything about this place is great.
Thorndike opens his bar up, his collapsible bar, and pours Jim a nice, expensive drink, and begins to talk price about the Thorndike Special. Jim says he has about $75 to put down, to which Thorndike was not amused. However, the sales lady does take notice and is amused by all the interaction between Mr. Thorndike and Jim. And as Jim turns his anger towards Thorndike, a 1963 Volkswagen Beetle with Ragtop rolls into the showroom and bumps into Jim, much to the disgust of Thorndike. So I'm a big fan of Top Gear, and I thought this was interesting because in the Jeremy Clarkson version of Top Gear, they had a running gag on the show where they claimed that the Volkswagen was the worst car ever made.
What?
And I thought it was interesting that that Thorndike also despised the Volkswagen Beetle and began to kick it and take out his anger on it. To which Jim is not amused and stands up for the car.
Yeah, you don't treat a VW like that, man.
That's right.
How did Herbie get in the showroom again? Because I didn't
Well,
actually
Like
see
he
it
let
happen.
himself in.
Spoiler.
Yeah, he
alert.
opened the door
Yeah.
and came in. Yeah.
See, okay.
But what I was wondering was, is the British sentiment towards Volkswagen Beetles? Is this a British thing, or is it just a Top Gear thing, or is it a post-war British thing? I don't know.
I
but
think
either
it's
way.
below the standard of the Thorndike dealership.
Okay.
You consult our grandparents' Volkswagen book with a bunch of comics. It's like an anthology of comics about Volkswagens, making fun of them and how small they are and how efficient they are.
Comedy gold, man.
So the sales lady, Miss Bennett, informs us that the car was recently returned after having some difficulties with the previous owner. Jim leaves the luxury dealership in disgust, and on his way home, we see a white Beetle following him as he hops onto a trolley and rides home.
I may add, he lights up a cigarette, which I did not
Yeah.
remember. Shocked.
Yeah, I know. Shocking. Because they didn't even typically do that in Disney movies. But yeah, and live on location on a real streetcar too.
That's right.
And how did Herbie escape this time?
Hey, man, he's got his ways.
Wandered out, man. Yeah, he's
Man, you guys sure like your love of this movie just glosses over all of these plot points.
Well, I mean, who's going to stop him? Yeah.
All right.
Listen, if you find that hard to believe, these next few movies are going to blow your mind.
yeah. You got an uphill road. If Herbie getting through a door and and escaping
Well, I mean,
dealership is problematic for you.
We're sticklers on other movies and their plot points and making sure things happen as they should. And so then when this kind of stuff happens, I can tell sometimes you guys just gloss over it, and I'm like, oh.
I'll give you the first one, but I mean, the garage door could have been open, man.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's like keeping an eye on cars to make sure they escape.
Right.
Keep an eye on that Beetle. He's been trying to get out of here all day.
I guess that's a fair point.
I mean,
car
yeah, to me,
might
the
run. We got
weirder
a
thing
runner.
would be like, how
We
does he
got a
know
runner
Jim
here.
is in there? How does he know Jim is in there and he wants to meet up with Jim? That's one thing. But yeah, I could see him just like taking off from the garage. And
Right.
I mean, they may have been chasing after him. Who knows? Hey, where are you going?
I think we should
Right.
examine every plot hole in this franchise because it's going to be great.
We need to do a really deep dive. I think this is. It'll be exhausting, but it'll be fun.
Yeah. It's just a suspension of belief, I guess it's fair to say, and just enjoy it as a movie, right?
Enjoy the romp.
Okay, I'm with you.
Can we also talk about, I'm sorry, the Herbie Foley effects of like Herbie like thinking and like reacting to things? It's good stuff.
The next morning, the police have arrived, and the detective is wanting to know whose white Beetle is parked outside. And Andy, did you catch who the detective was?
It's the Nutty Sailor from Boatnicks.
Yep.
That is right. That is Mr. Joe E. Ross from Boatnicks,
I was very proud
Nutty-
of myself.
the Nutty Sailor.
Officer Tootie.
He's like wearing
gonna
a
be
suit,
real disappointed if
not-
you missed
not-
that one.
No badge.
Plainclothesman. He's up in the force.
That's right.
Jim points out that he saw the car yesterday at a dealership. The detective tells him he's being charged with grand theft for taking the car. At the Thorndike dealer, Jim and Thorndike are having it out again, and they agree that Jim will buy the car instead of pressing charges, and Jim is mad.
Is this a normal kind of policy where they're like, you've just stolen the car, but we'll let you buy it if you want?
I want to buy it.
It feels like kind of like a Seinfeld plot or something.
It does.
He decreed that he has to be my butler.
Yeah, right. I'm going to interrupt with the wardrobe update. He's got the green turtleneck sweater, a tan overcoat, and plaid pants. Man, I'm really jealous of his wardrobe.
The overcoat killed me.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
like, that is cool.
So
That's
nice.
Yeah,
cool.
I did dig that. I think that was my favorite, was the overcoat that he had there. So Jim is mad. He's feeling like he's being forced to buy a car he never really wanted, even though he needed a car, but whatever. On the ride home, Jim discovers the Beetle isn't a normal car. The Beetle refuses to go or to get on the freeway and causes quite a stir, with one driver yelling, "What's the matter? You from LA or something?"
That was good.
The driver of that car, first, we point out the love of freeway jokes from this era.
Yes.
They love freeway jokes in general. But that driver was a Disney legend, Wally Bogue,
Yes.
aka Many Things, Tiki Room Involved, and Pecos Bill at the Golden Horseshoe Review, and many other things. So a little cameo there.
And he's really given, I mean, it's like a point of emphasis where it's like just a still moment. So they're really putting the spotlight on that gag. I want to go back and give a quick shout out to Jimmy McDonald, which I'm assuming Jimmy McDonald, the Foley guy from Disney, did most of the sound on this. I don't know that for sure, but there is so much great Foley work, and it starts with the oil spill on Thorndike in the dealership. And shout out to the Herbie theme, which makes its kind of debut when they're driving around. A great soundtrack from George Bruns with the flutes and the guitar. I could just listen to that forever. It's really weird that they didn't come out the gates with that. They just they saved it for then.
It saved it till he hit the road. We also get our debut of the trademark Jim Douglas driving style. His steering technique, which is difficult to emulate in real life because you would kill yourself, but fun to watch.
All right, now, Michael, you spent some time in L.A. and the West Coast. What's the sentiment amongst SoCal people and the Bay Area folk? Because the joke about him being from L.A., I thought maybe was a...
Oh, that was spot on. That was like a total California joke that, like 50 years later, is still completely accurate. But
that's what I figured now.
Like San Francisco people think LA people are like barely civilized, like lunatics. So it pans out.
So Jim brings the car back to Thorndike, and we get a cartoonish wreck as Herbie slams in the front of Thorndike's Rolls Royce Phantom 5.
How'd they do this, Robert?
Another great car. How'd they do that?
Yeah.
I have no idea. But it's Andy, was it good? You want to talk about plot holes? I mean, I think slamming into a Phantom like that is...
I just suspended my belief after Herbie made his entrance and exit.
Okay.
That's one of the effects that kind of makes me laugh every time, because it's like super fast and he just bounces right off of it. And I don't know, there's just I guess when you have a studio of like X animation people, it's easy to do gags like that and make it pay off, but it's pretty funny.
Yeah. So I got a question here. So Miss Bennett is dressed up and heading out to dinner with Peter Thorndike. So what's going on here?
Yeah,
what's going
weird.
on, indeed.
Yeah, I had that question as well. Did not make sense because it seems like I couldn't tell if they were an item or if Thorndike was kind of, like her sugar daddy or something like that. I don't know. It just did not make
She
sense.
seemed real sweet on Jim earlier. Like she was like eating what he was serving. And
it's weird. I think as a kid, you just always accepted it because it's like the bad guy is always, in like 80s movies, it's always the bad guy's dating the girl and then the good guy takes the girl away from the bad guy or whatever. So you just kind of accept it. But like watching it now, it's like, that is odd that they would be going out to dinner like that. And I think Jim later even calls it a date. He's like, sorry about your date or something like that. So, and
it's a
she
gray
didn't
area.
say, no, it's not. Yeah, it's a gray area. Professionally, very suspect.
It's kind of like
Yeah.
the Bond or the Bond villain who would have like a pretty girl, and then all of a
That's
sudden,
right.
That's
James
that's
Bond would
totally
have
what
been-
that is.
That's on
totally
point,
why
yes.
I didn't even think about it. That is absolutely right.
She's the
Totally.
Grace Jones to Christopher Wolf.
Also set in San Francisco. I mean, it
Right.
fits
Yeah.
perfectly.
Miss Bennett agrees to take the car for a drive to see what the issue is. We find out that Miss Bennett knows all about Jim and his racing issues. She has trouble with names and faces, but she never forgets a car. A couple of kids roll up in a chopped Model T hot rod and want to see if that doodlebug needs a workout. Or I believe actually the direct quote was, "Dad want to give that doodlebug a workout?"
Yeah, I love this. This was great.
This is the first of the counterculture scenes. Wonderful. Some severe wigs
Yes.
going on already.
They love hippies. Hippies are the funniest thing in the world to them, and this movie's full of them.
And so this is where you get a little sneak peek of the back lot, because they did these close shots on the back lot.
Yeah, that was funny to me because like the racing stuff was outside in San Francisco, but the close-ups were backlight.
Right, yeah. All the wide shots are from San Francisco. It's pretty brilliant.
The Beetle takes off, blows the hot rod off the road, to which the kids take a bow at the end. And
This
as
is
we pointed
great.
out, we get a great hippie moment, but there's more of that to come. The Beetle won't let Miss Bennett out of the car and takes them all over town, pulling up to a drive-in diner.
Oh, it's one of the best scenes of Disney cinema here.
The Beetle refuses to let Miss Bennett out. And in truly, as Jeff was getting ready to point out, truly one of the greatest cinematic scenes in history. I stand by that. Miss Bennett pleads with the patrons next to her to let her out, yelling, "Help! I'm a prisoner. I can't get out." And Jeff, would you do me the honors to quote this scene?
Yeah, they say, "We all prisoners, Chicky baby. We all locked in."
I think I texted you guys when I got to that point, and I sent
Yeah.
an image saying these might be my favorite two characters so far in all these Disney movies you guys have made me watch. These were great. And he like turns to the guy Guinevere. I mean, that was beautiful.
Guinevere is his
Guinevere.
friend. A couple of weirdos, Guinevere.
Couple of weirdos, Guinevere.
Now I read that was actually Dean Jones as the
Yep.
hippie.
Yeah, that
I
was
never
Dean
knew
Jones as
that.
the hippie.
Oh,
for
I didn't know
real?
that either. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's him. He's got like kind of a fake nose on, but yeah, that's
You
him.
can definitely tell it's somebody that's disguised.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We also get this omnipresent lady who's the drive-in waitress.
Yes.
The actress's name is Iris Adrian, and she's probably been in stuff we've seen already. But she
I think
always
she was in
plays that
Boat
kind of
Next
like,
too.
I probably, yeah.
Oh, Nick.
And
Wouldn't
as
doubt
this
it.
sort of like crabby old lady figure, and she pops up in a ton of stuff.
Well, I love that they go to this drive-in against their will. They can't get out of the car, and they're arguing. And then Dean or Jim Douglas still makes the order, and it's a baller order. He says 2 hamburgers and a coffee. Which,
Yeah.
tip of the hat, man.
Yeah.
Right on time.
That was so cool. And she just puts the menus on their windshield. I mean, that was just so awesome.
Uh-huh. And they must stop and eat the hamburgers because later he makes a joke about the hamburgers. So apparently it was, they stuck around.
So the Beetle lets Miss Bennett drive, again showing her that the car is in control, not Jim. She wants to prove this. So at Seabreeze Point, they pull up and begin to argue some more. At this point, Jim gets out of the car, and they start arguing as Herbie follows them down the pathway, only to be confronted by a cop who begins to berate them for letting their car roll off without having his parking brake in. I can't remember why they walked away at that point, but they walk away. The cop agrees to let them go, and we turn around with a nice gag where the cop's car has rolled into the water because he didn't put his car in parking brake on.
And they're ducks.
Kind of odd cop. He's kind of a weird guy. He's kind of a gentle, dense.
A very Mayberry kind
Yes,
of guy.
totally.
It was not just Mayberry. It was like Return to Mayberry. Like
Thank
Barney
you.
5
Thank
past the
you.
prime.
It's not even-
Thank you for the Return to Mayberry shout out.
Now you got Incompetent 5. Vote for Ben Woods.
Oh,
that's great.
Really good. I'm happy.
Back at the firehouse, Jim is under the hood, and Tennessee is spouting Eastern philosophy from his time with the monks.
I didn't expect that kind of like those deep thoughts from Buddy Hackett.
Oh, yeah.
So Buddy Hackett's pointed out, or Tennessee's pointed out, that we take machines and stuff, and we stuff and stuff more information. Before long, they start thinking more than we do. That's pretty super deep.
It's a little predictive, too. I mean, it's like a little smart technology.
It's true. Yeah.
That's a great monologue for our society today, as a matter of fact.
Did anyone notice there's the staircase knob is in the shape of a mushroom? Anybody notice that?
Hey, I did not.
Counterculture stuff. Yeah,
San Francisco.
that's right.
This firehouse is another place I'd like to be in real life with the gas tank
Fish
filled with
tank.
fish.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great vibe.
Yeah, that's a nice touch. Little hippie touch.
Oh, and Jim Douglas thinks that Herbie's behavior is easily explainable because it's a result of an advertising gimmick.
Yeah, I put in my notes that like Jim trying to justify Herbie's behavior, saying it's like some weird mechanical issue, is insane.
Yeah, and then even more insane is that it's advertising.
It's an advertising gimmick.
Yeah.
It could be lots of things. It could be a stuck rotor or a this or that or an advertising gag.
But he clearly the main thrust is he thinks it's a mechanical thing, right?
Yeah, and Jim's kind of a jerk.
Oh
A
yeah,
little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But Jim notices that the Beetle does have quite a bit of speed, and he decides he's going to race it. And as they cruise around town in the Beetle, Tennessee decides to name it after his uncle, I believe, who was Herbie, or Herb, the boxer.
Got that Herbie theme going on. I could watch that B-roll of Herbie driving around San Francisco to this theme all day. Put it on Disney Plus.
A little zen.
Yeah,
Just zen.
it could
Herbie
be part of
driving
the
around San
Tennessee show.
Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get our first race at Jackrabbit Springs. Herbie is dominating. Miss Bennett is looking on, starting to take notice of Jim and Herbie.
They're having a hilarious little picnic on pit row. He's like,
Yeah.
Yes.
he's got Crystal, and they're like drinking brandy, and they have a bunch of fruit and cheese. It's
That racing cinematography was excellent. I mean, just
Yes.
watching how they just cut all that together, and the way they shot that, it was just beautifully done.
and the thing
Yeah.
they have a couple of nature shots at the beginning too.
I was gonna say, my headcanon is that George Lucas based Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull on the shot of the prairie dog or whatever at the start of this, since that's how he started off Indy 4 with that shot.
You mean Steven Spielberg?
Oh yeah, well, yes, Steven Spielberg. I don't know. It was goofy, so my mind went to George Lucas instead of Steven Spielberg. Sorry about that. Yeah, you were correct.
It's hard to throw Spielberg under the bus.
Exactly. My brain had a block, refused to do it. Yeah, totally.
So Jackrabbit Springs is actually Willow Springs International Motor Sports Park, located north of L.A., and was used in the movie Ford versus Ferrari, along with a whole bunch of other movies. But I noticed it in Ford versus Ferrari. I thought that looks like the same racetrack they used in that movie.
Huh.
So Jim is taking all the credit and not giving anything to Herbie. As they win the race, Peter wants to buy the car back, and Jim again is taking the credit and considering selling it back to Peter because he's a great race car driver now. He won a race. He doesn't need Herbie. Herbie's not winning those races. Miss Bennett convinces Jim to race Peter at Riverside International Speedway, another LA track, and the winner of that race would get Herbie outright.
I will also have to mention this race marked the premiere of Jim Douglas gum chewing technique as he drives his aggressive gum chewing technique. So that was a little hallmark, a Disney first.
I also want to say that he says after the race that he was beginning to think I wouldn't be anything more than a piston happy lead foot punk.
That was a good line.
Good line.
Yeah.
That's a good line.
Why? I did have a question. Why is Thorndike a racer? Because
That
he
is
has
a
the
good
showroom.
question.
I was confused by that as well. Like I could see him being like
An owner.
an
Yeah.
an owner or even some sort of snooty European racing, but like this like crazy kind of wild California dirt track racing
Mhm.
doesn't seem like like he would be interested in that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll talk about this later in my notes here, but I'll go ahead and mention it now. So, like, I remember going back to Top Gear, that in the '60s, this type of racing was really popular all over in Europe, and it was making its way to California at this time.
Oh.
So it was just you just grabbed a car and went out there and raced it. There was no sponsors, and if there was a sponsor, it was a really low level. The gas station down the street would sponsor you, or the car dealer, the independent car dealer would sponsor you.
Or the Asian grocery store.
Or the Asian grocery stores, it may turn out later. But there's two trains of thought. You got a European car or you got a big U.S. muscle car, because the muscle car could take the straightaways and just tear it up, and then the European car could go through the turns. And so you'd have all these little European roadsters, and then you'd have these Corvettes and these Mustangs and Camaros out there, which you saw a lot of on the track.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting.
Would that context, would the audience in 1969 have been aware of that, and which would have made Herbie being in these races that much funnier?
I would think so. It was really popular, evidently. I mean, back then. It's obviously died off now. You don't see that kind of thing except at like smaller dirt tracks. But we mentioned Ford versus Ferrari. That was what they were doing in that movie as well, which also took place in the '60s.
Gotcha.
In the race, Tennessee tells Herbie to sandbag until the last lap, at which time he signals for Herbie to go in kind of a really goofy Buddy Hackett kind of way. He's holding a sign. It says, "Go Herbie" or something to that effect, but he's delivering it in true Buddy Hackett fashion. Thorndike tries to block Herbie, but Herbie passes him, squirting oil in his face as he goes by, with again some Solly Foley work. Yes, exactly.
That's a good gag. Thorndike always getting something on him.
A montage begins showing Herbie winning over and over at Laguna, at Monterey, at Las Vegas, and at Tulare, I believe was the name of the race. We're greeted with headlines. We get a headline that says, which is weird, and then maybe it was more of a context thing at the time, but it says, "Douglas car will not run at Indy out of technicality, intake too small, says officials." So to me, I could have cared less if he ran at Indy. I didn't think that was really relevant, but they threw that in there for some reason.
Right.
At the
Probably
time.
because that's the race that everybody knows.
Yeah, it's the
So
race.
it's like,
everybody knows,
oh,
yeah.
he even got big enough where he tried to go to Indy but couldn't.
Yeah, because it was on the front page of the newspaper.
See, they're covering plot holes, Andy, right there.
That's not covering plot holes. That's lazy.
Potholes.
So since they can't race at Indy, they do the next best thing, and they go south of the border to Tijuana.
Well,
Oh my gosh, this.
Yay!
we haven't been racist yet, so it's time to get racist.
The big road race. And why is Thorndike racing in this one? I didn't understand that either.
That's a
He's
great
been in
question.
some of these classes. I mean, even like the Jackrabbit Springs race, it was too small for him to go to that one. But
International.
maybe he was chasing Herbie. He wanted to beat Herbie. He was obsessing over it. Maybe that's what it was.
I liked the two Mexican racers making fun of Thorndike. Did you guys catch that? One of them, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but one of them was, have you ever seen the movie Rio Bravo with the John Wayne and
Heck yeah.
Dean Martin and Rick
Yes.
Nesson? One of those guys was Carlos, who is the inn owner
Right.
in that movie.
Yes. I can't remember his name, but I saw it in the credits. It's it's like Gonzalez, something
Yes,
Gonzalez. Yeah. This is like a weird cartoon.
Yes,
From-
this is bizarre.
The guy standing there in the dust after the cars leave is like something from a Ward Kimmel cartoon. The chicken flying at the car,
Yep.
like somebody off screen throwing a chicken in like Thorndike's face or whatever. The sped up mariachi music, the school bus.
Oh, yeah. They got to throw in every Mexican stereotype they can into this short little area of time, like the drunken people heckling.
They just needed a bull racing down the road.
Thorndike is racing in what appears to be like a Jaguar D-Type, which is an extremely expensive car and makes absolutely no sense. First of many very expensive cars that he races, besides the Thorndike Special, which makes no sense why he's racing this car, which is an open air car in a dirt environment in Mexico, but whatever.
But not only dirt, like off-road, like
yeah, they're off-road
sand dunes and stuff. Yeah.
It looked like Mad Max.
Much better for the school bus.
That one pan shot across the desert does look like Mad
Yeah,
Max,
so then
you're right.
So they have the bizarre moment with the movie, the racers, it's clearly a bunch of little tiny model cars that they're dragging across.
Yes.
And they're moving like a prop in front of it, a mountain, and they're sliding it by the camera. And then the mountain covers up the cars. So you just see this big cloud of dust going by. It's very cartoonish and very clearly fake, and it was jarring, but it still made me laugh because of how bad it was. So I enjoyed it. So, but can anyone else explain that better than that? I mean, that's...
No, I just like that it ends with their victory photo and Herbie's wearing an enormous Herbie-sized sombrero.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
Either. That's great.
Yeah, he's got a huge Herbie sombrero. Let me tell you, if you enjoyed this scene, you'll love Herbie Goes Bananas.
That's right.
Coming up soon.
So as we point out, Herbie wins. Thorndike is humiliated yet again, and that includes a lengthy explanation of Act 1.
I love that wooden cart that Thorndike's getting.
Like with the solid wooden wheels.
Right.
They're not even like spoked wheels. It's like caveman cart.
So beginning with Act 2, back in San Francisco, Thorndike is agitated. He's convinced that Douglas has done something to the car. Maybe he's made a bigger intake, I'm not sure. Carol suggests he's become obsessed and needs to forget it. Thorndike suggests for Carol to get to know Douglas at the very moment that Jim calls Carol to set up a date. That works out pretty well. So back at Jim's, he's spiffed up, ready to go on a date.
Still don't understand their relationship. It's still maybe is James Bond.
Well, this is messed up because Thorndike's like asking her to do a Notorious, like Alfred Hitchcock, like
Right.
Ingrid Bergman in Notorious, to get with the opposition a little bit, and it's kind of weird employer suggestion.
That's right. It's a different time, I guess. But back at Jim's, he's spiffed up, ready to go on a date. Carol picks him up in the Special, taking off Tennessee that he is not driving Herbie. So immediately, once the two are off on their date, Thorndike shows up to pay his respects to Herbie.
Now, is that the same suede sport coat from earlier, or is this a new one?
It looks like the same one, but he could have a whole closet full of them. Who knows?
I need to give Emily Sundby, who was a costume designer for this movie, a shout out. She did costumes in Gus, in Boatniks, Freaky Friday, The Computer That Wore Tennis Shoes, and of course, The Cat from Outer Space.
Yay! There it is.
A lot of good costumes there. A lot of good costumes.
She was on point in this movie.
It was Tennessee prepares Irish coffee by heating up the water with a welding torch. Thorndike proceeds to try to figure out what's under Herbie's hood. What's been changed?
Did you hear Tennessee's line when he's doing that?
What did he say?
You need
He
asbestos
says,
gloves.
Yeah, always have asbestos gloves when you're making coffee this way.
Yeah.
Maybe not anymore, but
So we get this whole back and forth between the date and Tennessee and Thorndike back at the firehouse. So on the date, Jim is falling harder for the car Carol is driving than her. And he says,
Kind of creepy.
"This is how it ought to be, me and these kind of wheels. And without a real car, I'm only half a man."
Yikes.
That's a great line.
He has no self-awareness. Back at the firehouse, Tennessee is getting ripped on this Irish coffee. And Thorndike is doing the old switcheroo where he's acting like he's drinking it, but he's pouring the Irish coffee and some added whipped cream down the gas tank. And he hops up and down on Herbie for added measure. Sugar in the gas can, Robert. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it'll do it.
Back at Seabreeze Point, where they go to make out, Carol and Jim run a gag where they can't start the car and get out again, but this time it's all about the moves. And, and Jim has the weirdest line where he says, "When the light hits you just right, you're as beautiful as General Grant on the $50 bill." What is that?
I had that in my notes. I said, "You smoothie, Jim."
You
guess. Hound.
That is an odd compliment.
Why a $50 bill?
That's a good question.
Why not go for? U.S. Grant, more handsome than Ben Franklin, but just go for it, man. If you're in.
True. Back at the firehouse, Tennessee is barely functional. He tells Thorndike that the secret of Herbie is heart. Thorndike thinks this is all gibberish, but at last we are at Riverside, the big race. Thorndike is confident he will win. You know, he put the Irish coffee in Herbie, so. And all is going well for Douglas and Herbie until Herbie starts experiencing difficulties. And we've got some high octane Foley work here, Robert.
Yes.
Well, I was going to point out here that another car reference here that Peter appears to be driving a Ferrari 250. So if you're not a gearhead, that's an extremely rare and expensive car from the 60s. And again, where's he getting these things? He's just pulling these cars off a showroom floor and racing them. But yeah, it's crazy.
Okay. But what about the sounds?
The sounds were also crazy and amazing.
Some next level sound effects going on here.
It's some bubbling and belching noises and some crazy, yeah. There's a little effect where he almost jumps through the cloth roof. So Tennessee orders them to come in. As Herbie drives by, he just belches out a big bubble of foam out the exhaust. And Tennessee knows exactly it's Irish cream from the taste, because you got to lick the foam that jumps on you.
Of course, that's always a good idea.
Herbie breaks down to an amazing array of sound effects and wacky wheel effects. You know, his wheels go sideways and
with the crooked wheels, like the stagger leg wheels, is so great. And the way they stage his like final collapse, where he like goes up against like the rail and like his bumper falls off just at the perfect moment. That is so well timed. Oh, yeah. It's great.
So are we to assume that Herbie's had like 5 cups of Irish coffee at this point, or is it just that one that we saw him pour in?
No, there was definitely more shown than that. So
yeah, okay. I think he was just feeding him all night.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was going to say if it's just the one, then he can't hold his liquor very well. Poor Herbie can.
At the Herbie parade you were talking about, Michael, do they have like a one that's got like kind of like drunk Herbie?
Oh, I hope so. That would be the best.
Yeah,
pose with drunk Herbie. Yeah.
Or just as it goes down the parade, just kind of got the wobbly wheels.
They should have a drink dispenser like stand that's Herbie, but it comes out as like tailpipe. It's the Irish cream.
Or if you need whipped cream, it shoots it out the tailpipe.
Like had a Herbie espresso machine or something.
So as Thorndike celebrates his victory, he won the race. Herbie blows Irish cream all over him as he's loaded into the truck.
This is another a dumb sight gag, but so well timed, so well played.
Wasn't Peter like brushing off like the beautiful women there too as well?
Yes, he couldn't be bothered.
Like I don't even know how they did that. Those perfect splotches, just like straight up his middle. Good stuff.
Back at home, Tennessee says Herbie has a fever. Carol shows up, says she's not with Thorndike anymore, everybody. What does that mean? What does it mean?
I don't know.
And Tennessee begins to tell Carol all about Herbie. And she manages to fix Herbie, cleans the fuel lines out, and Douglas comes back in a beautiful new red Lamborghini. Robert, you know what kind this is?
This is a Lamborghini 400 GT, of which they only made 23, which is about to be 22 in a minute.
Wow.
He says he needs something that can cut it. And he's got to stop kidding himself. He needs a big, powerful car. He claims he made some changes to Herbie and did a good little bit of country driving. So he's really in denial here.
Yeah, it's a total jerk. I got to call out, there's a nice little bit of business when after Tennessee gives Carol the lecture about Herbie and being real, and she does a nice little thing where she kind of goes to pet him kind of, and doesn't, but it's just kind of whoa, this is weird. It's a fun little, I don't know, it's just a fun little bit of acting there that I always really like, because she's thinking about it and is rubbing him down, then kind of goes to pet him and stops herself. It's fun.
She's going to become a believer, though. So Thorndike calls with another offer from Herbie. Jim accepts.
He's calling from a car phone, too, isn't he?
That's right. That's right. Tennessee is very upset. And Carol gets upset as well, because she's now drinking the Herbie Kool-Aid. She believes it.
My question is, Jim knows at this point, because you can tell by what he says to Thorndike, he knows that Herbie was sabotaged. So why is he mad at Herbie?
He's got that denial, man.
Well, I mean,
ego.
This, you were talking about, his character being Jim being kind of a jerk. It's been a slow descent. I think he's starting to turn for me, because here in a minute, he's going to go full Heisenberg.
Yeah,
it's Heart of Darkness, man.
And so more and more, you just kind of see it. You're like, wow, this guy's. You kind of stop pulling for him.
So
That's
Herbie's
right.
Jesse. Is that what you're saying?
Well, Tennessee's got the blowtorch and all that.
Yeah, I was going to say Tennessee. It might be Tennessee.
So Jim accuses Carol of going out with him so Thorndike could sabotage Herbie, like you said. Him and Carol get into it. She tells him he didn't win any of the races. That was Herbie. And around that time, a noise is heard outside, and Herbie is wailing on the Lamborghini. So, guys, what did you think about this scene?
I mean, that's not cool, Herbie. It's murder.
That's dark.
It's so dark.
It is super dark.
That's what I'm saying,
And
man.
later, there's a shot of oil on the curb. It looks like a crime scene.
That's right. Well, it is.
It's
Murdered that GT, man.
yeah, straight up murders him.
Jim hits Herbie with a shovel. So that's another dark moment. In a fit of rage, he says, of course Herbie is jealous because Douglas gets all the credit for winning the races. So he believed it the whole time. Now everybody's on the Herbie plane.
Everybody's like, yeah.
Thorndike shows up. Thorndike doesn't seem to notice the destroyed Lamborghini in the background. He's just completely oblivious.
But he's like, this seems like as good a time as any for me to show up. So he's like, I can tell something's going on, but blah, blah, blah.
Douglas throws him up against the wall, says he believes it too. He says Thorndike knows that Herbie's sentient. And Tennessee says, Herbie don't believe in you anymore, Jim. And Herbie is gone.
Gonzo.
Driven off into a matte painting of the night.
That's right. He's not going to help you because this is a private thing between the two of you. Good luck. It's very formal. But Jim is off in the foggy streets of San Francisco to find Herbie. And this is quite the segment here.
Yeah, this is amazing. The amount of work that goes into these sets for just 5 seconds is mind-blowing to me.
So we've got Thorndike. He's calling his people to put eyes on the street to find Herbie. Jim is running around the rainy streets. Herbie is driving through alleys, running into walls. It's kind of like Herbie's drunk. He's
there's that shot of him in an alley, kind of leaning against the brick wall, like he's down and out hobo Herbie.
That's right.
He's just like, I'm just a bum.
Thorndike's people spot Herbie, tow him off. Douglas hears Herbie's melancholic honk. As he's getting towed off, he runs after him. He mistakes a white Volkswagen with some people necking in it, which was I always remembered that scene from this movie.
I saw a really weird cut here. As Jim is coming into the alley and Herbie's leaving on the tow truck, like there's a cut, and they cover it up, but you can see like the dirt on the ground kind of shift all of a sudden. So there was this weird like jump cut there that really it caught me. Thought it was just an odd production gaffe there, but
back at Thorndike, some mechanics try and take Herbie apart, but he goes nuts and drives through the glass.
They're like sinister garage goons.
Yeah.
They're like lit, like high contrast lighting, and they're like thugs.
Dick Tracy vibes.
Yeah.
So we cut to what I assume is like a Chinese Lunar New Year celebration, something.
yeah, they were kind of vague on what was going on here.
It's a parade at night, and we hear the marching band playing the Herbie theme, which I like that little detail.
I love that.
Yeah, I wrote that down. It's like, where this does not sound like Chinese or traditional Chinese music to me.
Yeah, they play like college fight songs during the Chinese New Year celebration. Anyway, Herbie is hiding underneath the Chinese dragon,
which is amazing.
It is pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Jim yells at him, and Herbie drives off, knocking down a column of a market, leading to some racist stereotypes of Chinese storekeepers. So we're in it with this crew.
Seems strange to have such an angry Chinese shop owner.
Very, very angry. Back in the fog, Jim looks for Herbie. Seeing him at last, drive onto the Golden Gate Bridge.
Can I just say that Jim must be in really good shape to be jogging all over San Francisco? Because San Francisco,
some miles here.
Like I walked around San Francisco and got real tired just from it's a hilly little place. He's just from one end of the town to the other, from Chinatown to Golden Gate Bridge, following a car. That's not easy.
But that shot, though, when he runs into the fog yelling for Herbie, that was a beautiful shot.
It is
beautiful.
beautiful. Right. All good stuff.
That. But yeah, when he heads towards the bridge, I wrote in my notes, what the hell?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Well, I said, I wrote, like any good fun family film, Herbie goes to kill himself.
Right. Yes. Yeah, so we see that Herbie is indeed trying to end it all on the bridge. Trying to off himself by driving off. I wanted to say that I think that they should have a little screenshot of this at the Walt Disney Family Museum, which is overlooks the Golden Gate Bridge.
There's a big room that looks out upon the bridge. They should have a picture of that.
I was thinking they needed instead of in the old backlot tour when Herbie would make his appearance, they should have had him like try to jump off of a bridge in the backlot tour.
So yeah, Herbie's trying to end it all, guys. I mean, what in the world is going on? This
is like dark. High drama, man.
I did not expect this because it's kind of been goofy and silly. Then all of a sudden, it took this very dark turn.
Dark, whoa, very dark.
That's what I'm saying. I was like, "What the hell?"
So when we were kids, we watched Herbie Rides Again a lot, and Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo a lot, and we didn't watch this as much. And sometimes I forget about this part, and I forget about the Lamborghini especially. And when I watch it again, I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot about this part. It's so disturbing. Oh, cars, man. You know, they're just like us.
Herbie's got some issues. He's got some.
Jim's got some upper body strength, though.
He can fly off the handle. So Jim grabs him and in trying to save him, slips to the front bumper. So Herbie has to drive off the bridge to save Jim.
I tell you, this is pretty nerve-wracking, though, because the effect is pretty good for the era. And because there's like a boat on the water down below going along, and he's hanging. I mean, he's got the upper body strength hanging from Herbie's bumper. It's pretty wild. And I love that when he's trying to save him, he says, "Come on, baby, it's going to be a beautiful day tomorrow." That's such a great line.
Oh, man.
So the police arrive. One of them says, "It looks like the car saved his life." And the other cop says, "I think you've been put on that Haight-Ashbury beat too long." Womp.
That's great line.
The young cop who thinks he saw Herbie save Jim is Pete Renaday.
Hey.
Voice of Henry the Bear at the Country Bear Jamboree and voice of many other things as well.
There we go. And with that, Act 2 comes to a close.
So it is that we find ourselves at the police impound garage, where the Chinese shopkeeper from previously and his assistant are going from car to car looking for a horn that sounds like Herbie's. Herbie's iconic. And eventually they do find him, find a dried squid inside as proof that he is the one who ran into their stand. All to the strains of an orientalized Herbie theme.
Right.
Which is a nice, classy touch. They tally up the damage on an abacus, of course, and deliver the bill to Jim. He says he can't pay the damages. He has no money. So the deal here is they're going to impound the car and auction it off to pay off the shopkeeper. And then we get a scene. Tennessee says that he taught English in Tibet, which is funny because who would let Tennessee teach English?
Prequel, man. We need the prequels.
Yeah, exactly. He wants to talk to the guy in Chinese to try and reason with him. So we get Buddy Hackett speaking in comedically exaggerated Chinese. I don't know Chinese, obviously. I have no idea if this bears any resemblance to actual Chinese. Or I would be interested to know if any of it was even trying, or if it was just him being ridiculous.
Buddy Hackett being ridiculous. Yeah.
I noted the same thing, though. Yeah, I was like this. I said, Buddy Hackett speaking Chinese is odd and uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So in Chinese, he explains Herbie to the guy. Turns out the guy is a racing fan, and he recognizes Herbie. He's got a newspaper in his pocket with Herbie on it. But now he wants to keep Herbie. Jim says that's fine, but he makes a deal. If the guy lets Jim drive Herbie in the big upcoming race and he wins, the Chinese guy can keep the prize money, but he has to sell Herbie back to Jim for $1. And the, trademark inscrutable Chinese man previously says, "Now you speak my language." And everyone has a good laugh. He spoke English all along.
See Boat Nicks for the same gag.
Classic gag. So we cut to the El Dorado race, where a very non-actor person, a person who I have been long obsessed with. Well, I had looked it up, is named Andy Granatelli.
Yes.
A racing guy and spokesperson for STP.
He was the CEO of STP. He was the.
I had never heard of this person before. I had just known him from this, and it amuses me every time.
It's amazing. It's very security guy at the Mouseketeers at Walt Disney World. It's like so abstract about racing and true racing. It's like, what is happening here?
He calls it like technical mamby-pamby or something.
Right.
Well, I'll add that he's a huge deal. I found out his nickname was Mr. 500, and he was the CEO of STP, and he is credited for bringing major sponsorship to auto racing. And he was the first one that teamed up with Richard Petty and gave him the STP, sponsorship, and ushered in the whole huge era of major sponsorship in the stock car racing.
I'm Richard Petty.
And he's in I think he's in 3 or 4 of the Racing Hall of Fames. And I thought, well, that must be why they got him, because he was very well known.
Yeah, especially if he had been a spokesperson as well as like a CEO, he would have been somebody that people recognized, I suppose. At least
he was
racing people would have.
Very flamboyant. Like he would wear these STP suits at the Indy 500 and it was real out there and crazy looking all the time. So
he was not very flamboyant in this.
Yeah, here he's the guy who's laying out the rules for the race, and as we said, he says instead of all the technical namby-pamby that there's so much of today, this race will have few rules. As long as you stick to the course, anything goes. So that sets the stage for shenanigans that follow. After the briefing, Thorndike approaches Mr. Wu and tries to butter him up a little bit. He wants to set a bet on the race, so they randomly step into a phone booth to talk, which I thought was odd. Mr. Wu points out that Thorndike was the guy who came up with the idea of small print on car contracts.
Another auto innovator, Robert.
Yes.
Invented small print.
It's a wacky gag. It's poking fun at society's foibles. Anyway, they start to make a bet. We don't know what it is, but we cut to the starting line. Tennessee is telling Jim and Carol that Herbie was so beaten up after his escapades that Tennessee had to cut the frame to straighten him out, and that he's hoping the whole thing holds together. There's really no word on what precautions Tennessee took when undergoing massive surgery on a sentient car. I don't know what that would look like. Sorry, Herbie, this is gonna hurt.
Also, briefly, just stepping back just a moment, the Chinese proverb stuff that Mr. Wu is spouting.
Oh man, yeah,
that's pretty rough too.
Yep. Yeah, and it's like every scene there's a Chinese proverb. Meanwhile, Havershaw, who I don't think we've mentioned, Havershaw is Thorndike's like toady.
Perfect name.
Joe Flynn.
Joe Flynn.
Was that the guy from Absent Minded Professor?
He was in Computer Wore Tennis Shoes as the dean.
Gotcha. Medfield College.
Medfield connection. Yeah. Thorndike strolls over to make fun of the Herbie crew and the fact that Jim, Carol, and Tennessee will all be riding in Herbie in the race. His line, "Is this the morning bus to Fresno?" I thought was really funny. Jim says, well, the car's so fast it takes 3 people to hold it on the ground, which I don't know what Tennessee's really bringing to the race, because he's like kind of dead weight. He's not really a mechanic. He's got a huge like acetylene tank, which has to be weighing Herbie down, but that's
welding assistance.
Yeah.
It's all he's good at. And
yeah, that's his thing.
He's not even good at that.
Yeah, he's not even good at that. And then he makes a really bad mechanical reference later in the race.
Yeah, well, he says he's not a mechanic. He's just a dude. Meanwhile, Havershaw, the toady, has been messing around with Herbie, and Thorndike delights in their evil plan. So we don't know what they're up to, but Havershaw's been tinkering around. The green flag waves and the race begins. Herbie starts to catch up with Thorndike. Havershaw pulls a James Bond and dumps a load of oil on the road, causing Herbie to spin out. But Thorndike, stupidly, is so distracted that he drives his own car into a mud pit, where a bear begins to crawl into the car.
Man, this set,
bear gag.
I think I saw the Duke boys, being chased by Roscoe on all this and jumping that pond.
Yeah, there's a lot of action here that takes place at the Golden Oak Ranch, which was Disney's like off-site facility to like film backlot stuff, like countryside stuff, and man, you can really see it here. Lots of gags. Herbie, meanwhile, is driving through a meadow, and they do the thing where he skips across a large pond, like a skipping rock. That's a fun gag. Jim chews his gum and seems nonplussed by all of these shenanigans. As they're going along, they splash Thorndike with mud, and as he's unable to see, mistakes the bear, which has climbed into his car, for Havershaw.
I'm all here for this. I'm all for it. This is really great.
It's losing me here because, all right, it's already been silly enough with Herbie, but then this only took it to the next level of silliness, I thought.
It's so ridiculous.
This is really ridiculous. He thinks, and he's talking to Havershaw. Of course, his face is covered with mud. He uses the bear's arm to wipe off his goggles.
So absurd.
As he's driving. And he finally bothers to look over, and the bear's sticking its head through a map, which is great. And he just passes out as the car drives off into the woods. And there's a shot the bear's trying to wake him up because he's in the driver's seat. And the car's like weaving through trees at high speed, and the bear's like nudging him, trying to wake him up. Oh, man. Finally, it stops, and the bear and Thorndike both take off in opposite directions out of the car.
How did they get the bear to look back? Because they both turn, pause at the same time, both look back at each other, and then run.
I don't know.
And the effect of the bear arm, I mean, it reminded me of the Wampa arm, and Empire Strikes Back.
I mean, it's basically the level of like somebody in a gorilla costume in like a Marx Brothers movie or something. I don't know, like a giant stiff furry paw sticking in from off camera. But then the bear is real the rest of the time. It's something else. But then, most importantly, Gary Owens shows up.
Gary Owens.
That guy.
Oh, just like a cool drink of water, Gary Owens shows up.
He's like the Robert Goulet of announcers.
Oh, yeah. That's
Robert
perfect.
Goulet.
He's doing race announcing now. He says Jim's in the lead. Thorndike has picked up Havershaw and is close on his tail. Says they're all approaching the old mining town of Chinese Camp. Back on the road, Team Herbie discovers that Thorndike has replaced their gas with water, and as they sputter to a halt, Thorndike speeds by, laughing maniacally.
And every time he goes by, he honks. And it's really intense, and it usually like blows them over. Which also gets me every time. They're like, I'm gonna get him good.
As they're attempting to figure out how far they are from Chinese Camp, we hear mystical Oriental music as like a dozen Chinese guys in sweatshirts show up to carry Herbie away on a stretcher because Uncle Wu sent them to help. So we're in Chinese Camp. Thorndike's fueling up at the slowest pump in history, which also makes a gong sound every time it rolls over.
It's wrong, but I laughed.
It's wrong, but I laughed. I laughed too because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
There is an ancient Chinese guy in a ball cap and bow tie manning the pump, and an even more ancient guy, his father, who's got like a Fu Manchu beard, sitting in a chair pumping the gas.
And they have a slogan on the back, don't they?
Yes. Put a dragon in your tank.
Is that a take? Didn't Exxon have something like that? Like
put a tiger in your tank.
Yep.
Yeah. So this was a fun little racist riff on that.
Wow.
Thorndike is furious, not at the stereotypes, but at how slow it's going. And the Chinese guy gives him some proverb in pidgin English about how hurrying is bad. But just then, Herbie shows up, and like 20 people, some in coolie hats, rush out to service Herbie in sped up motion.
That really cracks me up.
It's super silly. The wheels on the gas pump for Herbie spin around, gong ablazing as they refuel him. That's like a pit crew, but even more intense. Thorndike tries to pull away to follow Herbie, but his car has been chained to the ground by the old Chinese guy. And then that's when we see the back of the man's overalls. Tang Wu's quick service. Put a dragon in your tank. Oh, thank you for that. Gary Owens gives us an update on the race, saying Thorndike is again catching up with the field. He speeds by Herbie so fast that it knocks Herbie on his roof, and he spins down the road.
Honk, man, it's deadly.
It is. We get some more racing footage as the cars wind through the mountain roads. But oh no, Thorndike is tampering with road signs and sends the Herbie crew and some other cars the wrong way through the Lost Bonanza mine.
It's like wacky races now. This is
Yes.
turned into.
Yeah, they pass an extremely animatronic-looking prospector mining.
Yes.
Which looks straight out of the Calico Mine Train at Knott's Berry Farm,
Yes.
I have to add.
I just thought that was funny, though, that the miner doesn't pay the cars any attention. It just keeps on doing his job.
Baller move.
Yeah, like a bunch of cars follow, and they're like swooping around the mine on like 3 different levels, and the prospectors just keeps working. He's just still chipping away. Oh, it's so weird. Team Herbie eventually piles the car into an old mine elevator, kind of tip him in on his side. And Thorndike's taking a break to prematurely celebrate with some champagne. He is pulled over and is enjoying himself. When Herbie comes speeding down a hill from the old mine and Thorndike takes off in pursuit. Havershaw at this point has arranged for one of Herbie's wheels to come off. This is very The Great Race to me, the Blake Edwards film, The Great Race. So Thorndike gives Herbie a nudge, and sure enough, his wheel comes off, which almost sends Herbie careening over a cliff. There are not a lot of safety measures on these mountain roads.
No.
Whoa, no kidding.
The shot of the wheel going off the cliff really cracks me up. It's so long and
Yeah, it takes forever.
Yes, well, that's the second wheel. This is the first wheel goes off the steep cliff.
Oh, yeah.
Then we get some bits of business as Jim tries to pull Tennessee into the car before it tips over a cliff. And when everyone is safe, they discover that Thorndike has sabotaged their spare tire as well. Womp womp.
That was a
I
good
like that he
stunt.
cuts it into like pizza pieces. It's in Virginia City, the end point of the race's first day, a crowd awaits the racers. Thorndike makes it in first, and then much later comes Herbie. With the crew has lifted him off of his missing wheel by having Tennessee lean out the passenger side while holding on to Carol. They're kind of using him as a counterweight, and they're going along the side of a cliff on two wheels, and he's leaning over the cliff, and he nearly dies.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. That was a crazy stunt. How did they do that?
I don't know. I mean, clearly they had a lot of stunt drivers, and I don't know, just weird acrobatic stunt work to get him up on his side, and then they're hanging him out. Then when they start to lean too far, it's like they're all going to go over the cliff. Then they yank him back into the car. It's pretty wild, and that's when Herbie loses another wheel. And it flies off the cliff with a weirdly extended take because Jim goes like running after it, and it just goes forever bouncing off.
I said, who is this stunt guy they paid to run off after the second tire and like face plant into the gravel? It's intense.
Yeah, absolutely. So night falls. Mr. Wu's waiting at the finish line while the broadcasters and judges leave. And then out of the darkness, Herbie appears with a huge metal wheel in place of one of his missing tires. I don't know where they got this wheel, but it's like old, like mining equipment or something. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. So later that night, Tennessee's working on Herbie as Mr. Wu brings them some bird's nest soup because China. Herbie won't start, and Jim is depressed. Herbie's in super bad shape, like he is wrecked. And Jim seems to think it's almost cruel to make him go back out the next day. Like he's ready to give up. And Mr. Wu agrees with a mystical Chinese proverb. So Jim goes off to sulk and Carol joins him. They have a little talk about Herbie and the relationship between men and cars and how that is. And he finally admits there's something special about Herbie, something that doesn't even have a name. He wonders why Herbie picked a loser like him. And Carol says Herbie must have thought Jim was worth belonging to, just like her. Aw, so they have a little smoochie. And Thorndike pulls up with a tow truck. And it turns out that his bet with Mr. Wu means that whenever they lose the race, he owns Herbie. So now they're giving up. Herbie belongs to him. He gives a weird little monologue about who's going to have Herbie vivisected and destroyed. Yeah. It's kind of rough. And gives him a big kick. That's just mean.
And Tennessee makes an amazing noise when that kick happens.
I was going to say this makes Tennessee make a noise that I hope Jeff includes in this podcast right now. It's indescribable. So we're just gonna. Jim gets in a little tussle with Thorndike, and Thorndike's goons come in and hold Jim while Thorndike takes a sock at him.
Free licks.
And free licks, really. It's rough. It's mob stuff. And this sets Herbie off. Herbie comes roaring to life, and he chases Thorndike off, and then everybody kind of gives chase after him.
Isn't Thorndike rocking an ascot here and a jacket over his coverall?
Yeah,
or something ridiculous?
Yeah, he's fancy. Yeah, ridiculous. He's come to gloat in fancy style. They finally catch Herbie after Thorndike like jumps over a fence into the woods, and Wu says that Herbie has the strength of 40 horses, and which apparently he actually does in real life have 40 horsepower. Says it's time to get the egg foo young off their face because he's Chinese. So so they're back in it, man. The next day arrives. And everyone's lined up to race. Herbie is shaking and angry and tries to murder the Thorndike special before they can start.
Herbie, man, anger issues.
Herbie is ready to scrap. He goes after the Thorndike special, and I like the I don't know, some official is like, "Watch it, Douglas." And you're like, one more screw up and you're done. They're trying to calm Herbie down. The cars begin to leave in the order that they arrived in Virginia City, and it's finally time for Herbie to depart. He has to wait around like forever to leave. So he goes roaring off, and we're on the road again. Herbie takes all kinds of wild shortcuts through the woods to catch up with the pack.
How do they shoot those? Like I was watching that. I watched it several times. Like he's cutting, they're cutting all these back, switchbacks, and he's cutting through. And like crossing over, like and it's practical as far as I could tell.
Oh yeah.
And like the cars would just miss. I mean, the only thing I think of was they were slowed it way down so they could time it better.
But it didn't look super sped up though.
Yeah, I know. It was very. I mean, the stunt stuff here was really good.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is, it's funny because in the opening credits, it had the drivers and it lists like 40 drivers or something, maybe even more than that.
Yeah, it's more than that. Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah.
And I don't know how I would love to know how they did all this stuff because it seems super dangerous. And like also getting a Volkswagen to do all the things that Herbie does, like off-road, seems nuts to me. Because they are going, like you said, the racers are doing these switchbacks up and down cliffs, and Herbie's just cutting across and like weaving through the cross traffic and just going up and down these, like, this is out west in the Sierra Nevadas or wherever, and it's crazy. So
how many Herbie cars did they go through? How many Volkswagens? I wonder when they went through
like
during
the Dukes
production.
of Hazzard, they probably had an army of them.
Well, they probably had more because they had the stunt, car, like the ones that would do wacky things. So that's a whole nother.
Yeah, they had the hidden driver vehicles and all
Right.
those. Yeah.
yeah, there were a lot of them. I've seen a number and I can't remember what it is, but it was a lot because each one would do like different specialties. So they're off-roading left and right, and they nearly catch up to Thorndike. Then they pass through Whiskey City, where they kind of demolish an old west town. Herbie's driving through buildings and running into everything, and things are neck and neck. They're out on the road, and then Thorndike just straight up runs Herbie off the road, off a cliff.
Straight up trying to murder him.
Yeah, that is like, and it's, yeah.
Herbie's got a
it's
dark
like,
streak. Yeah.
I will run you off a cliff and kill you. So Herbie runs off and lands in a tree. And then there's like a mini version of the Jurassic Park car and tree scene.
That's right.
Yeah.
Good call.
And
Yes.
Herbie finally falls out, which was a fun effect. And they just load up and take off again. Tennessee is worried that Herbie has done something to himself in that last fall and that he won't hang together much longer. They peel around a curve where Thorndike and Havershaw have pushed an enormous log out into the road, like an enormous sequoia log. And they run straight into the log, which sends Thorndike under Herbie's hood. They drive off without knowing Thorndike is under their hood, only to discover his face in the glove compartment, yelling. So they stop and pull him out, and he does a weird little like monkey walk because he can't stand up
Another
straight.
thing that takes too long. It's like the monkey walk thing. They just ride it out to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Back at Gary Owens' HQ, the crowd is heading to the finish line. Douglas is in the lead, but Thorndike is catching up. Aboard Herbie, Tennessee notices that the floor is starting to come apart. He has Carol pull on one of those straps they would have inside VWs to kind of hold Herbie together while he tries to weld it back. She does, like a boss. But then the roof starts to tear too, and suddenly things are looking rough. Suddenly the two halves of the car yank apart, and they're still connected by like the drivetrain or whatever, but are separated. Jim tries to stop so that they can rescue Tennessee from the rear section, but Herbie won't stop. Thorndike tries to overtake the car, but Herbie uses his swiveling backside to block the car from passing. Again, stuff that could not have been easy to film. I don't really know how they did it, but they did. Gary Owens is waiting at the finishing line with some binoculars, broadcasting the final sprint of the race. And just as Thorndike is once again congratulating himself on his premature victory, Herbie's two halves tear apart completely, and Tennessee, who's in the rear section, overtakes Jim and Carol and goes speeding off. Thorndike is now in a race with both parts of Herbie, and as the crowd cheers, Herbie takes first and third place. What do we think of this set piece?
I mean, just you describing it sounds so ridiculous. If no one knew anything about this movie and just heard what you just said, they'd be like, what in the world are you talking about?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
There's a nice drum roll though when he comes apart the first time, and Tennessee's trying to like climb into the front seat, and
Yeah, trying to bail out.
Extra credit for the Buddy Hackett looks when he's like passing people and just like,
Yes.
what is happening face. A plus.
A very good baffled face. And I love after they pass the finish line, they kind of do this the two halves do like a big circle and finally meet and then like pile on top of each other.
For some reason, I got that, in Last Crusade when the airplane passes the Joneses while they're in the tunnel.
Oh, that dude's face.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just reminded me of that.
Major Spielberg influence. Or
Absolutely.
There you
influencer. Yeah.
Oh man, it's going to find out that it all goes back to Herbie. So we cut back. We're back in San Francisco. Mr. Wu has taken over Thorndike's showroom. Thorndike and Havershaw have been relegated to working in the garage for some reason. And they kind of get in a tussle, spraying each other with motor oil in frustration at their lowly state. Havershaw sprays oil down Thorndike's pants, which I always wonder if it was improvised because it's a weird moment. And
Yes, I agree. I thought the exact same thing when I watched it. That was improvised.
because Thorndike goes like, ha, and then they cut away. I don't know, it's fun. Outside, Herbie pulls up with a giant bow on his hood. He's taking Jim and Carol on their honeymoon. And away they ride into the wilds of San Francisco. And that is the end of Herbie's first adventure.
Herbie's got to go to therapy, I think.
Definitely. Yeah, he needs to go talk to somebody. He needs to work out some problems.
He needs anger management issues. He needs abandonment issues. He's got all sorts of things.
Obsessive compulsive. I mean, he's got some real love issues.
Yeah, control.
Yeah.
Control problems.
They sure get married quick in these movies.
Yeah, I thought that too. I had forgotten that they got married.
I did
in
too.
the
It was the
I did
60s.
too.
and was like, wow, that is quick.
The summer of love.
Yeah, that's true.
It's true. It's San Francisco.
Well, it's that time, boys. It's time to rate this movie. And we do it using our unique rating system. Robert, what's the scale this week?
Our scale this week is cups of Irish coffee.
Good call.
Watch out for them, man. They'll lay you out.
Major plot point.
Speaking of plot, we're going to start with plot and writing. I'll go to Robert. How many cups of Irish coffee do you give this movie?
I've been going back and forth on this one. I'm going to go with a high 3. I almost gave it a 4, but the third act got a little slow for me and got to be a little too much. That kind of dragged it down, but yeah, we'll go with a 3.
Okay, we'll go to Michael next.
This one's tough for me because I'm also between a 3 and a 4. I think it could probably have been a little shorter, maybe cutting out a little bit, but I don't know. Most of the gags at the end worked for me, so I'm gonna go with a 4, a low 4.
I'll agree with that. And we'll go straight to Andy. What do you give it?
I'm going to go lower than you guys. I'm going to give it a 2. I thought it was, it's already ridiculous, the whole idea. And that's not really what I'm kind of knocking it for. I'm just knocking it for some of the other pieces, that I've already kind of spoke about. And again, the third act, it really slows down. I think this movie was probably 15 minutes too long.
Yeah.
I'm giving it 2.
I agree with that.
We'll go to casting and acting. We'll start with Michael.
I'll get a 4. I like everybody who's in it, and they all are well suited to their roles. There's, aside from the unfortunate Chinese things, everybody does well. So I'll give it a 4.
And back to Andy.
I'm gonna go with a high 3. I think it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. So I'm gonna go in the middle of the road.
All right. And Robert?
I'm gonna go with a 4 as well. There was a yeah. I'm with Michael. I didn't. It was good. No complaints. I mean,
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with you guys. I'll say 4 as well. Good at production value, and I will start with this. I love a lot of the production on this movie. I mean, you got to give the drivers credit and all the car gags, the matte paintings, the setting, the aesthetic of it all. The music is all good. I think that, some of the green screen looks bad now, but that was common from there, but they used it a lot. So I'll ding it for that. But I loved all the interior work. I mean, like we said, all that stuff is great. So high 4. And Robert?
I'm going to agree with you on all those fronts. Almost gave it a 5, but the green screen stuff took away. And it's not that I think that, I mean, it's a sign of the times that it was tough to do green screen, but even some of it was, there was one shot where they're in the end with the cars coming apart, where the car's clearly not, it's almost floating above the ground. They just didn't get the angle quite right on the green screen. So yeah, it's going to be a 4 for me.
Andy?
I'm going to go with a 4 as well. I mean, it was no Freaky Friday racing kind of production at the end there, but yeah, I'm going to go with a 4.
And Michael?
I'll go to a 4 as well. I mean, it was super ambitious for its time, I would guess. And like these Disney special effects movies were like the big special effects, big deals of their day. But, there's some stuff that hasn't aged well. So, yeah, 4.
Okay, we'll stay with you, Michael. Entertainment value for this. How many cups of Irish coffee do you give it?
I'll give it a 4. I mean, it's Herbie after all. There are things I would nitpick, things about its pace, things kind of inconsistent tone at times. That's kind of weird, but it's fun.
Robert?
Yeah, I loved it for the first 2 acts, and then the third act, I was just kind of like, it was just basically this the whole race, and it turned into this wacky gags for the whole third act. So I'm gonna go with a high 3, I think.
I mean, I agree with you all that. Yeah, halfway through this, I was like, "Am I going to give this a 5, just like I give Swiss Family Robinson?" Because I am entertained. It's not an overall ranking, but it went on too long, so I'll say 4. And we will end with Andy.
Yeah, in my non-spoiler review, I said I love this movie until a point, and I think that's going to knock it down to a 3 for me. I mean, there was parts that I really enjoyed. Then as Jim's character just become more and more of a jerk, and the movie just kind of started dragging, it just kind of really bummed me out in a way. So yeah, I'm gonna go with a high 3.
Yeah, it's so intense. I mean, gosh.
Yeah,
Jim.
It really does. Yeah, gives a little too much of a heel turn.
Yeah. All right, well, let's punch this into our computer that wore tennis shoes. Robert, what did we give the Love Bug to start off this Herbie bonanza?
The Love Bug came in at a score of 3.63, which puts it at number 6 overall.
That surprises me, but I guess not after watching it. Yeah.
Too.
So it did better than Tron for us.
It's better than Tron.
It's interesting.
Came in just below Rocketeer at a 3.65. Then Natty Gann, it's sitting in the top 4.
Oh, wow. So we have given it our stamp. Michael, what did Leonard Maltin have to say about the Love Bug?
You know what? I couldn't find a Leonard Maltin quote about Love Bug. I was
shocked.
That
is shocking.
In his book, The Disney Films, I thought I would definitely find something, but he just kind of offhandedly mentions it.
That is really shocking.
It says shocking, it's a special effects comedy and doesn't really say anything pro or con. Leonard.
Call us, Leonard.
We need
Tell
you.
us what you think.
Yeah.
We need to know.
Drop us the line.
That would be great to get Leonard Maltin on here.
I would love it.
Yeah.
So this launches off a series that we're tackling. And like I mentioned it before, this was a series that Jeff has been pushing from the inception of this podcast. He's been wanting to do the Herbie series. So Jeff, for our next Herbie movie, what do we have?
Well, have you all, I mean, we've just watched the first one. Are you all dying to know what happens to Jim and Carol and their marriage?
Yes.
Too bad.
Oh,
Because we're not going to deal with that. We're just going with Herbie.
It will never be mentioned again.
What? Are you? Oh, God.
We are going further into the world of Herbie with Herbie Rides Again. And as I have mentioned, this one was on heavy rotation in the Crawford household.
Not because of its relative quality.
Nope.
Just because of when you're a kid and you get something on tape, that's what you watch.
And I think I was pretty obsessed with cars. So, I mean, I still want to know what was on the VHS because I feel like there must have been something before that was.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Maybe it was a ducking disaster with Donald Duck or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Fucking disaster.
I want to challenge you all for the next episode. I mean, we kind of have jumped into this, but I'm thinking about this next movie will be the center of a Disney cinematic universe. And I want to challenge you all to think of trees of the Herbie cinematic universe. It seems like this time we've kind of come up with the Tennessee backstory Disney Plus one. So make sure you come with your best pitch at the end of Herbie Rides Again, because it is a nexus. And Andy, you are going to be thrilled who the heavy is in Herbie Rides Again. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Okay, can't wait.
Somebody you've seen before.
I'm excited.
It's been a long time since I've seen this one. I actually don't remember anything about it.
I remember everything. I can't wait to
yeah.
talk about it.
It was on a VHS. We watched it some, but I have no memory of it though.
You were too busy watching Splash as a
I
child.
must have been
Being forced to watch Ollie Hop Noodle.
Hop Noodle, yeah, that's what he's watching.
As always, Todd Naprick is doing his thing with our graphics. Why don't you cut him loose with your brand and see what exciting new concepts he can cook up for you? Todd Naprick at bindandgraphics.com. You can check him out on Upwork. He knows how to make you look good. Todd, man, that Swiss Family Robinson graphic. Come on, people. Just get in touch with Todd. So that wraps it up for us. Anything else to say about Herbie before we continue to Herbie, boys?
We have a, no pun intended, a long road ahead of us.
I'm so excited. I can't wait.
I'm looking forward to this next one. Like I said, I know who the villain is.
All right. So from all of us to all of you, we wish you well. We will see you next month for Herbie Rides Again. Take care.
Proud are we of mighty Medfield, our mother dear. All your sons and daughters hail to thee, Medfield College of Technology. And while we hold your banner high, rock, rock, we shout your praises to the sky, rock, rock. For proud are we of mighty Medfield.